The wind dragged Evelyn Hart's thin shawl across the empty road, twisting it around her like a prayer abandoned to the snow. 5 days had passed since the city cast her out, leaving her with nothing but hunger gnawing at her bones and shame gnawing at her heart. Each step sank into the frozen earth. Each breath came in shallow, desperate gasps. Yet she moved forward as if the path itself were calling her home. Some folks don't break loudly. They break quietly, like frost turning to dust. And Evelyn had learned this truth before she had even reached the city gates. Her memory was sharp with the sting of that cruel expulsion. She had arrived at the gates, eyes pleading, voice trembling with the weight of widowhood, asking for even the simplest work. Sheriff Calder Briggs had stood there like a carved statue, the chill of judgment in his voice. "Widows with no coin bring trouble," he had said, and behind him, the Crowders, the harsh-eyed Ezekiel and his cold wife Mara, whispered that she was cursed, dangerous to their livestock and their luck. The words clung to her like ice on bare skin, and when they shoved her beyond the gate, it felt as though the city itself had breathed her out, rejecting every inch of her being. The days that followed were a slow, cruel passage through hunger and cold. She slept under the skeletal arms of fallen pines, snow whispering against her face as if trying to soothe her aching body. She drank from the half-frozen creek, letting the icy water burn down to her stomach in a reminder that she was still alive. The moon hung like hammered silver in the sky, and the shadows of the forest pressed close. Yet there was a strange beauty in the solitude, the way the cold could make every sound sharper, every movement slower, as if time had been drawn out to let her grief linger fully. Hunger clawed at her with jagged fingers, but it was nothing compared to the emptiness of being unwanted. Even in her isolation, the echoes of town gossip followed her. Agnes Price's whispered warnings, the Crowders' cruel laughter, and the sneers from strangers were carried on the wind, a chorus of judgment that made the snow-laden forest feel heavier. Bad luck follows her. Her man died under strange stars. Evelyn carried those words like stones in her coat, each one a reminder of how the world could bend against you with no rhyme or reason. On the 5th day, exhaustion overtook her. Her legs gave way on a trail dusted with snow, and she fell against the frozen earth. The world dimmed, and she felt herself slipping like a candle guttering in the wind. In that haze, she heard it, the distant crunch of heavy boots on hard-packed snow. She thought it was a dream, or perhaps the spirits of the mountain coming to claim her, but then she felt a hand, rough yet gentle, lift her from a cold. Boone Remington was a silhouette carved from the storm clouds themselves, a giant with shoulders broad as the horizon. His eyes, deep and quiet, held no judgment, only a curious, steady kindness. He did not speak immediately. He simply examined her with careful hands, checking her breathing, feeling the frailty she carried like a shield. Then, with an effortless strength, he lifted her as though she weighed nothing, and the world shifted under her in the gentlest way, reminding her that there were still those who could bear another's burden without complaint. When she woke, it was to warmth and light dancing across the cabin walls, the scent of venison stew curling into her nose like a promise. Boone moved silently in the corner, carving wood, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. He said nothing of the city, of the hunger she had endured, of the shame she carried. He simply set a cup near her, filled with warm broth. "Eat slow," he murmured, voice low, roughened by years of solitude. "Your body's been empty too long." Evelyn's hands shook as she lifted the cup. Her throat was tight, and she swallowed against the lump of gratitude and disbelief rising in her chest. Words failed her, but her eyes met his, and for the first time in nearly a week, she felt a flicker of safety, a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. "Why help me?" she whispered, voice brittle as the snow outside. Boone's eyes softened, and he replied simply, "Because someone should have." And in that quiet answer, the first thread of hope began to weave itself through her frayed heart. Days passed in the mountains, each one folding into the next like the quiet rhythm of snow settling over pine. Evelyn Hart learned the cadence of Boone Remington's life, a gentle routine carved from solitude and the slow, deliberate work of survival. He would rise before dawn, stoking the fire and checking traps, leaving a cup of warm broth by the hearth before she stirred. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the way he moved, each gesture precise, yet softened by a care that seemed almost sacred. And as she regained strength, her own hands began to move again, tending the cabin, mending his worn clothes, stirring the stew that scented the cold morning air. Each small act was a testament to her own survival, a quiet reclaiming of dignity that had been stripped away by the city. Town gossip, persistent as the wind, managed to reach even the heights of Boone's Mountain. Agnes Price, traveling the rugged path with her sewing supplies, brought news that curled into Evelyn's chest like smoke. Ezekiel Crowder says that widow is trouble. Says she bewitched a man once. Boone listened silently, jaw tight, and Evelyn felt the old shame rise like a tide threatening to drag her under. The world had not yet forgotten her, and for a heartbeat, she wondered if her fragile hope was nothing but another burden. At dawn, she tried to slip away. The snow crunched softly beneath her boots as she edged toward the tree line, unwilling to be the cause of any more trouble. Boone's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, shawl draped over her trembling frame. "You don't know me leaving," he said, voice calm as the morning air, yet carrying an authority that made her halt. She lowered her gaze, the tears she refused to shed in the city now finding their way silently down her cheeks. The threat arrived soon enough. Sheriff Calder Briggs, grim-faced, led Ezekiel Crowder up the mountain path, the reins of their horses creaking under the weight of accusation. "Hand her over, Boone," Ezekiel barked, teeth clenched. "She belongs back in town. She stole from me, and she will answer." Boone stepped forward, his massive frame a silent barricade, yet he did not raise his voice. The tension crackled in the air like a distant storm, the only sound the whisper of wind through the pines. Evelyn trembled, not from fear of Boone, but from the dread of returning to the cruelty she had fled. For the first time, she spoke. Her voice was trembling, fragile as frost on a window pane, but it carried over the snow. "I stole nothing," she said. "I asked only for work, and you cast me out. I was left to starve. 5 days. I nearly died." Her hand shook as she gestured toward the trail where she had collapsed, and the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath. Sheriff Briggs faltered, doubt flickering in his eyes, while Ezekiel Crowder's face twisted in fury. Boone placed a hand lightly on Crowder's wrist, a gesture so calm it was terrifying. "If she leaves this mountain," Boone said, voice low, steady, "it'll be because she chooses to, not you." The giant's gaze held the weight of snow-laden pines, unyielding yet fair, and Crowder could not move. Briggs looked at Boone, at the truth in his stance, and saw the lie unravel. Begrudgingly, they turned their horses and rode back down the path, their shouts fading into the wind. Evelyn sank to her knees, relief breaking through her fatigue, and for the first time, she allowed herself to cry freely. Boone remained near, not touching, not speaking, simply standing witness to her grief. Days stretched on in quiet companionship. Evelyn helped Boone gather firewood, mend his clothes, and prepare meals, each task an exchange of trust. Fingers brushed, glances lingered, and conversations grew warmer, not with declarations, but with shared moments. The tilt of the head to watch the snow fall, the offering of a hand to steady a footing on the icy ground. Slowly, through these gestures, a connection bloomed, tender and unspoken, a recognition of two fractured souls finding solace in each other's presence. Then came a final test. Sheriff Briggs returned alone, his posture hesitant, face tinged with unease. "The town discovered the truth," he admitted. "Crowder lied. She stole nothing." He extended a tentative offer, a place back in town, a chance to reclaim what the world had taken. Evelyn looked down at the snow, then across to Boone, and for a heartbeat, the past tugged at her, tempting her with familiarity. But she did not turn back. Instead, She stepped closer to Boone, letting her choice speak louder than any words. The mountain air seemed to exhale in approval as the sheriff nodded respectfully and rode away, leaving them in the quiet splendor of their hard-won sanctuary. Evelyn leaned gently against Boone's shoulder, and he did not pull away. Together, they watched the sun sink behind jagged peaks, painting the snow with molten gold. And in that moment, the world felt safe, whole, and tender. The wind carried a lesson as old as the mountains themselves. Sometimes, a single act of mercy can rewrite a life. Some people grow tall not in body, but in spirit. And sometimes, after the world casts you out, grace finds you in a stranger's hands. When you feel forgotten, look for the quiet souls. They're the ones who will walk you home.